Good day, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for joining me for the Tools and Plant 3D for Accelerating Design. So today we're going to be going through, of course, exactly as what I've just said, these lovely tools that we've got in here. No hard and fast things, but firstly, who am I? I'm Quinn Kennedy. If you need to get hold of me, you can get hold of me on my work email at quinn@micrographics, which is quinn@mgfx.co.za. And yeah, I'm application engineer here. So I work primarily with AutoCAD on 3D, Inventor, Fusion 360, and yes, I am trying to go Google part-time, but it's not going so well at this stage, I'm afraid. So it's moving swiftly along. Our agenda. So firstly, I'm going to go through a bit more of the intro stuff, which we're getting into. This is just the part we currently are at. Some tools, part insertion, compass, elevation, routing, etc., etc. Some general tips and tricks, a little bit of structural steel, and then our outro and QAs. So yeah, if you do have any questions, by the way, throughout here, I am monitoring. There is a little chat window in the bottom right. So if you do have any queries or anything, just post it in there and I'll get to it as soon as I see it. Cool. Well, let's get on and moving swiftly along. Okay, firstly, I'm not a person that likes PowerPoint so much, so I've got this policy about no death by PowerPoint. Just realized that you had to be jargons, and that because I do a lot of stuff on the fly, there could be times that things go a little bit wonky. But we'll try and get through that as best as possible. Oh, and one other little thing here, we've also got hardy doors. So if you do hear some horrific screeching in the background, it is not somebody trying to murder somebody, it is just our hardy doors that are stinging over. If you're not from SA and you don't know what a hardy door is, well, yeah, good luck. Okay, firstly, in moving swiftly along here, we've got our tools. So what our tools are that we're going to be looking at is, firstly, is our part insertion, compass, elevation and routing, and some part supports. I'm also going to be jumping between things, and I'll also go through some general tips in that while I'm working with stuff. So firstly, under this part insertion, let's take a quick look at here and what we can see. Okay, so in here, I'm now sitting in my plant space, and well, not just plant, but also in IP and ID space. Also got a 3D plant open over here. Nice little defined model. So, first and foremost, some part insertion tips and tools that's going to hopefully help you a little bit. Now, a lot of guys, when they're routing, will just go, okay, cool, we're going to use this little drop down here. If they know about it, they'll switch on, show all their line numbers, and they can then see their line numbers, select the line number, and then start routing pipe. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but there are more efficient ways of doing things and working around. Such as, when you're working with routing your pipes, yes, you do have these little numbers. Now, just a little tip here, you can actually use these numbers, and this is part of the reason why it helps to work with both PNID and 3D, is that you can use this as a checklist, in that if you're rooted, if you think you've routed all your pipes, and then all of a sudden you look in your line list over here and say, hey, wait a second, I've still got pipes remaining. It's a good indication that you need to go back and take a look as to what's up, what's happening. That's going to be in a case-by-case basis. Or otherwise, vice versa. If you realize that all of a sudden, oops, you need maybe a dosing line or something, you can route a new line and then realize, wait a second, I have to put that back into my PNID side. Just a little bit of tips there. Otherwise, looking here more on the part insertion. Now, a lot of the guys will, like I said, use it just as a plain routing of pipe, or otherwise routing pipe in our tool palette on the right over there. Both are fine, but you can make it a little bit more interesting. For instance, if you look over here, I have got a polyline that's routed around. If I select it, you can see it's actually a 3D polyline. So we can actually use this to our advantage. What we can do is we can say, okay, line to pipe, Select the line. If you can drag the line, what it's doing now is it's actually selecting behind it. So sometimes you just need to get a good, there we go, angle on it. So there, if you do have that issue where it's not wanting to select, just adjust, pan, or orbit your view around, and that should help you. Enter. Now, as you can see, it's broken terribly. The reason for this being is because I was routing a 200 nozzle pipe. So obviously this is not going to work. So you're going to have to be a bit more careful with this and make sure that when you're routing, it's not going to misroute. Well, taking basically the size of your piping into account and what your standards are. So I'm going to put this back to what it's supposed to be, which was 100, I think. If I jump back to my PNID, I've got 100 there. And I'm going to do the same thing. Parts do not fit. Oh no. The reason why it's saying parts do not fit is because it was trying to get into that nozzle. Because it's trying to get into that nozzle there, what I could do is grab it. You notice that I pulled the pipe back using the grip. Just undoing a little bit. Show what I mean. I grab the little grip on the end, pull the line back, and you notice the line is gone. Because it's actually consumed that polyline that was used. And by the way, it's just a normal polyline. You can even join normal lines together and then use your join command to get them into a normal polyline, and it'll also work. So what I can do now is just use my node and node it on there. Oh, you know the reason why it's actually not doing this? I was going to get into this in a sec as to what's going on over here. So with this, I'm actually going to jump a little bit ahead, and I'll jump back to here because this is actually a good time to mention this, which is basically this equipment over here. Now at the moment, a lot of the time if you're going to speed up your work, there's a lot of stuff you can get offline, like especially suppliers will send you a lot of suppliers equipment. Now this is a nice high detailed model of some supplier equipment. It's a KSP pump, so it's a vertical inline. I've got some specs updated. So what we can do here is we can actually turn this into actual plant equipment very simply by using our convert button. Now a lot of people out there will be very familiar with creating equipment using this create button over here. So when we create equipment, we've got all of our details here, which is pretty much fine, but there's a lot of information that goes in this and it can be quite tricky. Or time consuming with this. But I mean, if you've already got the model there, why not use the model? It makes your life faster and easier. Also, you know that you're working with the data and that you're getting this from the supplier. So to convert this, we're going to go to our equipment tab, home tab, equipment panel, and then convert equipment. I'm going to select my convert equipment and select the item. By the way, it's generally better to have this as a block. So what do I mean by that is that here in this window, I have got my free model. And if you can actually see, this is downloaded directly from the website. So you can see this is in a whole bunch of different pieces. So what I've done beforehand, I've actually primed this a bit. And I've already inserted my little point here. This is just a normal point in space. So the command for that is PO, for point. And I've placed it over there. That's going to be my base point I'm going to use, which will come into play in a sec. And then what I did is I just used the block command. You can use whichever way of doing this you want. Block. Okay, because I'm going to be a bit lazy, I've already turned this into a block, so I'm just going to use that same name, but this would be like normal. So that's its name. It's an 8080-250, so things I'm more interested in here is in the 1880. So this is going to be my nozzle details. Take a base point. And grab that from node. Select the objects. Cool. Now that I've got that done, 100%. Okay, it's asking me to redefine because remember I was just reusing data. Cool. So now that I've got this made into a block, that's basically to the point at where I was on this drawing over here. So here, he's already sitting in, ready to go. The reason why I actually had him sitting in there was so that I could space out my systems nicely. Okay, so with this, what I can do now is convert it, as I said prior. I'm going to convert. When I click convert, it's going to ask me what is the sub area that this is going to go into. Because this is a piece of it's a piece of equipment. Pump. I'm going to select pump, of course, and select. Next thing it's going to ask me is where's its insertion base point. I'm going to select the same node for my insertion point over there. Now it's created into a on 3D piece of equipment, which is quite a nice little handy thing. If I click on the tag, I can even tag this as what it should be. Now I know that should be key 1100 sign, and okay. Now if I click on it, you can see firstly, now if you're used to font, you'll notice probably something immediately that you don't really see any port details or anything assigned. So what we need to do is add a nozzle. Click add the nozzle button over there. You can also right click and say add nozzle, does the same thing. And go node. So if you look over there, I'd actually primed this to have a node snap. It doesn't look like it's wanting to grab it. Let's try it again. Node. Nope, still not wanting to grab it. In this case, where plant is being fussy, remember what I said about EOV dragons? Cool. Grab that point. Pointing it out. Changing the nozzle, and I'll change this to 116. And then all I did is I just used one of the default specs. Close. Close. You can see now how I immediately knew that there was a nozzle not assigned. Sorry, Jacques, I see that you said something about the bends overlap. Were you meaning about the bends over here? Ah, yes, those. The reason why it overlaps is because I've got long radius set as default. So to fix that, I can just change this to short radius. That would actually be taken care of in my spec editor. So, yeah. What I could do is just put it back and then we'll snap it there. So, of course, what it's going to do is it is going to route your parts in reference to your spec editor specifically. So, if your branch table is not set up correctly for what you're currently doing, it's not going to work on my program. Well, what I'm going to do here just now, though, is going to pull it this way. I'm going to show you guys something in a second. Cool. Jumping back to this piece of equipment here. Sorry, jumping around a bit. If you're going to go to this piece of equipment, and I'm going to add another piece of the nozzle. And I'm going to go to the center point. Second line, pipe 100, flanged, pressure class 16. Close. So now I've got my pump set up. And you can just route it straight in. And then if everything's set up correctly, it should. Hold on. Cool. So that is just a quick way of getting that in. I've got another quick way of getting stuff in, but this depends on if you've got an Autodesk Inventor. So if you've got Inventor, you can see I've got the same. I've actually switched to Autodesk Inventor. Stop there. I've now got this pump. Now, if you've got this, it really does make your life a little bit easier because this pump now is sitting here. Now, as you can see, it's also got a lot of fine detail to it. You've got these little fins, you've got these little holes, and these are all separate little items. So what I can do here to make my life a little bit easier and make things better, there's the hardware I was talking about, is we can take this and we can say, okay, let's chuck this into the environment tab, go to the BIM content. First and foremost, what we need to do is go to shrink wrap substitute. Going to jump to the feature tab, and I'm going to select remove all features, remove all pockets. I'm not really going to go too deep into this because this can take quite a while to do some checking and culling of data. And then click those. detect features, checking, okay, this is stuff we can start working with. Let's do the preview. As you can see, it's kind of killed a lot of data. It's made very simple stuff. Okay, wait a second. Maybe not all of that. Let's just remove the pockets. Preview. Sorry, remove the pockets of the selection list, and you can see the holes. Preview that, and you can see it looks a lot more decent. I'm going to go OK. So what I've now done is I've simplified the model, and I've made it a little bit lighter in the system. Depending on how much time you can put into this, it can actually really create a lot of a difference. Hot connector. And what I'm going to do is leave it on circle. Like that. So what I've now done is with pipe connector, well, with this part of here, I've actually defined the port. That arrow pointing out is not the flow direction, it's the direction of where the port is running. So just be aware of where it is going, and that's going to make your life a little bit easier. If it's pointing inside, it means the pipe is going to be routing towards the pump. Pointing out is going to be routing away from the pump, kind of its default direction. Normal diameter, 100. Cool, we're okay there. Use the drop down for type. I normally set mine to undefined unless it's one of these other ones you're going to use, but the problem is that plant at the moment won't pull all this information through. But here's the golden rule. What you want to do here is set your connection type and properties. You can drop that down and set it to flanged. I'm just going to go OK on that one. You can see there's a port detail. I'm going to go to this side and do the exact same thing on this side. Oops, I don't think I got the right one there. That doesn't really matter. Can you see the port is now in the wrong direction? It's going inside. And use the flip command and flip it around. So now it's pointing out. Diameter, you can see it's a different circle that I chose there. So I'm just going to force it to a 100. Sorry, I keep ticking the tick box. Not supposed to tick the tick box. Well, you can, but there would be other reasons for that. Use the drop down, change the connection type to flanged, and OK. So now this is actually the side done. So we're using the BIM component of Inventor. And I'm happy with this. So I'm going to quickly save, golden rule, save early and often. I'm going to export the component, and we're going to export it as not a Rivet file, which is RFA, not an IFC, but an ADSK file. Unfortunately, they've not actually done it yet that you can do this export using this. I'm just going to quickly browse to where I want it to go. So I'm going to track it into my documents. Find where this one is. There we go. Select the files. And I'm just going to track it in here. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly edit this name so it makes a little bit more sense. So, BIM data, wada, and save. Now, you're probably wondering, why am I showing you guys this now? It's because if you're doing it via Inventor, it saves you actually a lot of time and effort once you know as to how this thing goes. I can actually create equipment much faster in Inventor than I can in Plant 3D. And also, when we do it this way, all of our ports will already be predefined. I'm not going to do the translation report. I'm not too interested in that. But now, you saw how I had to do all those steps, taking the 3D model, making it into a block, importing it into the drawing, or into our plant drawing, and then defining the ports. By the way, the reason why I didn't define the ports in this drawing is it's not part of the project. If I start playing around with that, it can get a bit twitchy. I find it's better to generally try and do it in an actual project drawing and define your equipment there. Getting back to actually bringing this stuff in, I'm going to use this little button, which is converted the Inventor equipment. By the way, this is not just for our pumps and other equipment. It could be that maybe your company creates all sorts of other equipment as well, especially with proprietary equipment. Oh, that's why I'm not able to see. Yes, Quinn, well done. Documents. I should have set up shortcuts actually. That would be a much cleverer thing for me to do. Related files, we're going to jump then to our ADSK file. And there we go. So there's our .adsk file. Go open. You can see it's now placed it in here. The reason why it's a little bit off kilter, and it looks like it's on the side, is because I didn't notice that I brought in the model first. I had the pump. If you take a look at the top over here, you can see my view cube. The pump is actually, for some odd reason, brought in on its side. Not a major train smash, it's just more of an irritant. But when I bring it in, I can say pump, and you'll notice that the data, the pumps, everything over here is already predefined. There is going to be one little thing here that I'm going to have to do, and that's click on the little adjustment, and then change my pressure class, because unfortunately it doesn't bring the pressure class through in this case. Close. By the way, you don't need to close to jump to the other nozzle. You could, if you're being clever, unlike me, you could jump between the nozzles using the nozzle number at the top there. And pressure class to 16, and close. Okay, so that is just bringing in a piece of inventory equipment. So if I jump back to here, so what I've done basically is I've jumped to over here in the adding items part. So inserting AutoCAD and inserting an .adsk file, because while doing this while doing this, I just decided to change things around a little bit so it makes a little bit more sense. So we were here in the parts insertion, and that just ties better into our adding items area. But getting back to this. Now, like I said, still here in the part insertion. There is something here as well before I move on that I also find very useful that a lot of people don't seem to take advantage of, which is our key and ID line list. Now, like I said, this does kind of involve that you need to have your drawing already preset up as a key and ID backend as well. So what I mean by that is that if you take a look at my key and ID, let's take a look at pump 001, right? Sorry, 1100. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this as a base. I'm going to go, okay, cool. Well, I'm going out of the pump over here, 180. Oh, I can actually see the nozzles are 80. Remember, the pump is 80. And then afterwards, I've got a reducer going from 80 to 100. I've got a valve, HV101, and then it comes together another T. What this then means is that I can use this line list, expand it and say, oh, okay, well, what do I have in here? It's not actually giving it to me right now. Okay, well, it is kind of, it's not giving me the whole thing. What I can also do is generate selector lines as well. So what I can do is I can start routing a line. Firstly, I need to fix these nozzles. I'm going to change the nozzles to 80. Okay. And then I'm going to change my line to 1100. Okay, cool. Just drag this line in. Interesting thing, by the way, if you really get your line there, it's not going to do that because it's probably a little bit off kilter. Oof, really fighting me today, isn't it? Node. There we go. Reducer into our nozzle. Same thing over here. Okay, make sure I am on the right line. You notice, by the way, I'm on the 100 line, but remember the nozzle is 80. Doesn't matter because as soon as I pull it out, it jumps to 80, and then I can just resize it to 100. Now, like I said, what people don't realize about this ID line list is you can actually use it to also add in and check your items. Because what you can do is click on it, place an item, And if your stuff is actually correct, you should be able to place it straight. It's complaining because I've kind of have made this a little bit have hot while I was going. Going to select it. And place the bulb in. So you can kind of use your PNID line list to also place items in, and then as you work through your lines, you can then check stuff off. You know that if you're working from top to bottom, by the time you get to the end of your line list, you then realize that, hey, wait a second, I've got everything in, I'm good to go. And if you get to the end and you're still trying to route stuff, you know, wait a second, what have I missed off in my PNID area? Which can sometimes happen. So that's the one I added in over there. So there, HV 101. Now, another cool thing about this, by the way, is that if I go in and assign a tag, you'll notice the tag has already been pre-assigned as well. So this way, we didn't actually have to worry about assigning another one. Okay, that being said, next thing that I'm going to show you, so that was a PNID line list. You'd also get some of the other ones, but they're more common. A lot more people they don't really worry about too much about that. There is also PCF to line that if you do have any PCFs that were generated via ISOs, you can bring that in as well. Very similar to then basically how our pipeline, well, lines pipe routing works. But a little bit simpler because it's very predefined. Next thing I just wanted to show you guys here, if we jump back to our slides, is our compass. So locking in the stepping angles and also the control of right clicking, which yeah, I was actually quite surprised because some people I've also seen have got issues with that. So what I mean by that is that our compass over here, this is actually a very interesting little tab because when I'm routing line, I can route a line and you notice my little red compass pops up. If you hold control and right click, and if you actually read by the cursor, you can actually see it says use control plus right click to change the compass plane. You can see as I'm doing this, my compass then flips around and changes in accordance. So there's my horizontal, there's a vertical, and there's another vertical. But the thing is that this is around the axes of the pipe, around the center line. This is horizontal, on the horizontal plane, and on the vertical, it's basically in line with the pipe. Sometimes we want to like flip it to make sure that that it's on the same line that you're worried about. By changing these degrees, we can actually then change this to, of course, what our locking is going to be. The problem being with this, though, is that if you do this, you're going to have your parts in your backing of your spec editor. Sorry. What you can do to get around this is you can use cutback elbows, and that can get around it. If you are still jumping around like this, there's one other thing you can do, is make sure that your auto mode is not set on. Now, once our auto mode is off, you notice that we can actually then lock. There we go. And lock to our different lines. If you want to specify a specific line lock, line degree, you can just use tab and then jump between the different settings. So it's pretty much freeform what you can do from there. So with this, it gives you quite a lot of flexibility and where you're wanting to go and route around. So normally what I do, to be honest with you, is I don't use these subsections as much because they can get a bit tricky to try and get them to do exactly what you want. What I'd normally do is I prefer to use the auto routing option, which would literally be from picking from the endpoint, giving it a slight difference, normally staying about 45s, etc., rolling elbows, and then with that little piece rooted up, then what I'll do is I'll take it to an endpoint. At the moment, it's complaining because it was a little bit too far for it to do it properly. But basically, that's the way that I normally get that. So that's actually more of this compass here. Biggest thing that I just wanted to show off today was this thing about using the right click, because it was a method that I actually thought that a lot of people didn't know, but it does create some issues with some people about it. Yeah. We're jumping back here. Another one over here is the elevation and routing. So what do I mean by this is that in here we can actually lock our part, and then we can see as to how we are running around that lock. So if you take a look at this little section, what I can do is I can route some pipe around the top here. Look at my P90 line list. Let's say I'm going to be routing this 2000 or 1300, actually. Route some pipe. And what I can do is I can say, okay, I'm going to route pipe, right? And I can say I can route it on maybe this endpoint. You know why it's not, because I've done something over there beforehand. Does it matter if you're not locked onto something? Let us jump to over here on the steelwork. And I'm going to say, okay, I'm going to route this pipe onto this endpoint. Now, when I'm routing the pipe, normally your pipe is set to COP, center of pipe. So this is what we're looking at. And now when you're snapping to something, you can see that while I'm drawing, it will always be around the center. If though I were to set this to BOP and route a line, I can then draw it that my pipe is sitting on the bottom of something. So in other words, if you had something like what I had over here, I was attempting to show over here, and if I had this little pipe, I'll explain what I was doing there in a second, that's busy coming up. What I could do is I could have an array of these. Like that. Then just move it over a little bit. Missing 0 will play in there. Could have a whole array maybe, and then route my pipe directly on top of here. And that way I know that my pipe is running directly on top of either maybe there's existing pipe racks that you're routing on top of, or other walls or something like that. And speaking of walls, what a lot of people don't realize is that they'll use the drop down over here. Sorry, in the elevation and routing, that was the drop down. And then we'll go top of pipe, center of pipe, bottom of pipe. Well, like how am I going to then work against a wall or something? Use the drop down, there's actually even more stuff. Top left, top right, etc. So this was pretty cool. What you can do is you can say, okay, top right of pipe. Select my routing pipe. Go to the endpoint. Oops, my pipe's the wrong way around. Let's go top left. I can say, okay, route all the way to the side. And as you can see, my pipe is basically in line with the top section and also sitting right up against the side of the supports. So this can help us get like very close up against items that we want to be close to without running over it. So when you run attach detection, it doesn't lose its head. These are some of the things. So use this to your advantage. It really makes your life a lot faster. Other thing I just wanted to show you here was this asset elevation, which for some reason a lot of people don't use. Because when I say, okay, I want to run a line at 2000, and I just start drawing in mid-air, whatever, this looks like it's just randomly drawn there, which it is. But the thing is, I can be confident in saying that when I click on here, my top of pipe is set to 2000. The reason why top of pipe is set to 2000 is because if you look over here, I'm sitting still on top of pipe. Where this comes in, which really is helpful, is maybe I'm trying to route my pipe around and I'm worried about something, like let's say I don't want it to, well, I want my pipe to make sure that it doesn't exceed at the bottom of the pipe is not less than 2000. I can then route my pipe around wherever it's going. I'm just randomly routing it. Of course, you would be a little bit more careful in real life. And when I'm clicking my little elevation icon, I will do it over there. And then I'm hitting tab to jump between them. You can see my bottom of pipe is set to 2000. So this actually really helps you then with this flow routing. Okay, with this, these things really do help you when trying to get your piping around the plant, especially existing structures. Brownfield projects, I found this very handy. Very handy. Okay. Jumping back here again, going to go to these pipe supports. One of our last things here in the tools for insertion. So, what do I mean by that? Sometimes you'll notice that when you are working with plants, and you just see me actually detach something. But what people don't realize is that when they're trying to go and they'll create a pipe support, they'll look at all these different pipe supports and go, hey, okay, that looks quite interesting, but you know, these don't really get to exactly what I need or exactly what I want. Such as, for instance, we've got this pipe support over here, which is one of their built-in pipe supports. Now, I don't often see this type of support. What you can do, though, is you can take their stuff, such as, let's say, if I'm running this pipe over here, I can say, okay, cool, let's go and create, sorry, not that one, create a pipe support, not a piece of equipment, select the clamp, okay, because this is just the clamping part. You could select one of the others as well. Let's go nearest. Let's see if we can get it somewhere over here. Cool. And then just put the clamp on. This is where it gets a little bit more finicky, and it's more about like trying to get as close as possible. But what you could do is then use your other piece of steelwork, just a normal piece of done 3D modeling that you've done, or otherwise intelligent, depending. Just it can get a little bit tricky. Go to our midpoint, if I can grab it. Let's see. This node. And voila, on there. I know that this is a 200, so if I move it back by about, let's say, 40, that should be fine. And now you can see basically what I built over there. So what this is it's the stock default plant pipe support, but with our 3D drawn in support over here. You're going to say like, hey, Quint, but I mean, okay, that's a nice pretty picture, but it's not technically a pipe support. If you notice, this one actually is. It's because there's this little cool thing over here which we can attach stuff to the support. So we use the detach button, select the support, select the other item, and voila, it creates it into one support. Oh, I did something over there that you didn't like. But apart from that, yeah, it's just a visual glitch. You can actually see it's still there. So if we take a look over here, it's going to behave like a normal pipe support, but with one major, depending on who you're talking to, kind of issue, is that your pipe supports like this are actually adjustable. You can adjust them quite easily. Oh, pro tip, by the way, if you're trying to adjust them and you're battling to get the height right, just find something on the floor that's sitting or the same level, find where it is, and then snap to the bottom. And it doesn't matter where it is right and about. You'll notice it should be perfectly in line then afterwards. And it should behave like a normal pipe support. Notice when I erase, the entire line gets erased. With also the pipe support with that. Also, there's nothing preventing you then from taking it and then doing things like erase or copying them all the way down. And this should hopefully increase the speed of your drawing. Also, you can then create multiple stacks of them. So you could have maybe a pipe support that's got multiple of these sections on. There are some limitations, like I said, but I find that the ability to do it this way is a lot faster. The proper way of adding in pipe supports, though, are pretty hectic because each one of these actually has to be programmed into AutoCAD using Python. So it's quite a process to get those in. Trust me, it takes quite a while to get that right. It's not exactly difficult, but it is time consuming more than anything else. So I find this one of the fastest routes of actually doing that. You also get other things you can do, like putting on little supports, attaching. What I did there just now is I detached the support. So I detached on this, and you can see it releases the bottom again. That's using that one. So you can always re-edit it if necessary. Cool. So that's basically what I wanted to show for this section as to how I find routing a little bit faster. Jumping back to the slides. So what we went through: part insertion, adding some of the stuff via the compass, elevation and routing, and inserting items via the menu. So either using just normal attach or convert, sorry, should I say, and then bringing in via Inventor. Just some general stuff that I've got. So some new things that were actually brought into AutoCAD plants, which was not very well documented for some reason. Two really cool ones was, firstly, our plant copy. Excuse me. Was our plant copy line number, the new installation display, and some oldies but are very useful, which a lot of people don't seem to use. Subselection. I don't know how people get around without using that. And then using the actual 3D move, which does make our lives a bit easier. So, without further ado, let me get to what I'm talking about. Firstly, this plant copy line number. Now, this is a very interesting little command, because if I go to a line that's already been defined with items on it, if I type in plant copy line number, you can see there's a variable. Firstly, it's actually not on my default, technically off by default. And what this means is that you'll see this line, if I look at it in my properties, line 1000. Properties, HV 1001. So cool. So if I select it, add to selection, all connected components, and I were to actually get rid of this section first, add to selection, denote the part, all connected parts, and I were to copy them. You notice things like my HV in that. Watch its lines. Line number unassigned. All this stuff kind of loses data. Whereas if I had my using the wrong command here. Plant, copy line number. If I switch it to on mode, add to selection, all connected parts, and then I copy it, you'll notice now my line numbers and that actually remain on, which some people think it can be a bit dangerous, which yes, it can be if used incorrectly. But what this means though is that if I'm now copying items across, like think about this pump arrangement that you would have. In fact, I actually do have it over here, where you'll normally have like a standby pump, so your main running pump and your standby. So this would be a normal type of pump arrangement. Of course, obviously you'd probably have a non-return on the one side, but that's part and parcel of course. So you could do the whole one side and then mirror it, or bring it around, then mirror it, depending on what you want to do, and only have to draw one item and then just fix up things like your valve, your actual labels. Most of it's already there, and it just makes it a little bit easier because then you know what you have to change. Add to selection, make that my number. In this case, I do have two separate line numbers for these two branches. So this one would actually be new, sorry, not new, one there. This would be all line numbers, 1200. But sometimes when your branches come together, they are not actually it's this thing that's giving me issues because I've still got long radius set on. That is something I do need to fix. So basically, when these two come together, this would sometimes be, for some people, they'd have that as one line group. So in other words, that 1000 that was running on this side would be the same 1000 running on this side. Basically, what I'm trying to get to here is that the font copy line number would be very helpful there. Okay. Next thing I'm just going to quickly mention over here is the insulation display. So insulation display is quite an interesting little thing because what used to happen with plants is when you had insulation on, you would basically be able to toggle. Sorry, a lot of my language. When you had insulation on one of your previous systems, it used to just upsize the pipe. When you're upsizing the pipe, it can be a bit weird with visually. So what they did with the newer release is they allowed us to then select the pipe or pipe number, use the, go down into our properties, insulation thickness. Maybe I'm changing this. So this can be edited into the backend. Change the type maybe. So a lot of people get to this far because I've read up about it maybe or seen it somewhere, and they're like, oh, but this is not really working. So easiest way to check this out, go to your visibility and turn on your insulation. And then you can see a new thing. There's your insulation. So this actually just helps bring it to show. Now, that's quite handy, especially when you're working on pipe racking, because pipe racking, of course, we want to be able to visibly see our pipe, our insulation, and how close things are together. Very, very handy for conditional pipe racks. Other thing I mentioned here was sub-object selection. So over here, I've got two tanks. I can select my tank, select an item using control. If you hover over something, you can actually see it says control plus click to edit. You hover over there, see control plus select. Holding control on the keyboard and left clicking, I can then sub-object select. Another thing over here that we can do is if you're trying to align something carefully, like let's say I'm trying to move my pump to the dead center of this item. You can go to modeling, select the 3D move, select the item, and accept. Now, this is where people don't realize is that you can click one of the little arrows, go to base point, select node or something else that is in the center, and then move over to the center. This then allows you to align things quite easily just using your different axes. So you can go in just the Y, just the X, or just the Z. But remember once clicking on it to reset your base point to be somewhere where it would actually make sense. Okay, so with using our base point move, it is very handy then for realigning stuff. So that then is copying by part number, showing the insulation display, sub-selection with the nozzles, and then using our 3D move. I'm just going to quickly run you through as we're running out a little bit of time here. We've got our structural steel stuff. Now, I'm just going to, like I said, briefly touch on with this because first and foremost, although Plant is really good at doing this, it's not exactly its primary focus. So you can get a good mock-up, but I wouldn't waste too much time in getting too deep into these things. because it's just going to be a hole that you're going to sink a lot of time into with very little return. So getting back to this, if I jump back to my structural section, we've got all these different systems over here: members, grids, railings, etc., etc. With this, if I look at this, this is a grid that's been formed using grid. Just literally is a three-dimensional wireframe that we've got with some display on it. This helps us that when we're using things like members, etc., we can then draw easily around it. If you want to change these, the way that this is actually routing or what members are busy being used, you can use the settings drop-down and then change the various settings for the individual items. Depending on what standard you're using, there's tons of stuff in here. A lot of people accidentally leave it on the AISC and then wonder why they can't really change from there. Just remember, didn't generally just get a lot of the stuff we use in there. And once again, people like to ask about, yeah, but can we add to this? You can, but it's quite difficult because you're going to have to manually program these things in here. My suggestion would be to find something that is as close as possible, route it using those, and then change it afterwards in a program that's more suited to us, which I'll get to in a little second. So what I can do, I'm going to just select on top of here. If, by the way, something like this occurs, that it's in the wrong orientation, you could either change it in the settings to get in the right orientation, or you could use your modeling and rotate, like in this case, rotate it correctly, and then use things like the move tools to then move it back into position. This will just be one way of working. Sometimes doing it the quick way is the faster way. I know that sounds a bit strange, but sometimes doing it the fast way, of course, backfires. And this, I'm just going to quickly move on to this section, which is how do we actually treat these end sections? Like I said, although Plant 3D is not exactly a steel package, what you could do is you can go and use things like from our cutting area, where we've got lengthen, we've got quite a few other tools, but the ones that I use more often than not is either Cutback. So if we use Cutback, right, by selecting the one and then the other, I'm going to do that a little bit more slowly so you can see what happened there. So at the moment, they are crossing over each other. By using Cutback, I select both sets of steel. Whichever is the second selection is the part that's going to be cut back here. So you'll notice that one is shorter now. If I step back a bit, oops, a little bit too far back. See, back that they are clashing once again. And what I can do is I can use mitre, and you click on both of them. You didn't see it highlight there, but it did select them. If I select on them, you can see the two have now been cut. Last thing I just want to quickly mention here about this is you can also export your steelwork to advanced steel. So this would be the one time I would say it may be a bit useful, making sure that you kind of, do your steelwork marginally reasonably. It's okay. And what I mean marginally reasonably okay is basically get it close, but it doesn't have to be 100% accurate, because advanced steel, when you export it, you select the objects, and you're going to give it an output file. Oh, my poor spelling. When you export it, it's going to export these items into advanced steel. And then when they're importing an advanced steel, it will give you the option of changing the sizes of the beams, columns, etc., how they're fitting together, etc. You can take it from there. So this could be basically what you would use then as a template. As you can see, we'll try to export. While it is busy thinking there, let me carry on with over here. So basically, I just quickly covered quite a few of the little tips and tricks that I found that really helps people and that people aren't really taking advantage of in majority of the time. And some of them are a little bit more advanced, some of them are actually fairly nuanced that it's just people are not using. One of the things that I do say when it comes to plants is that it's one of those ones that is actually really worth moving around with, really worth playing around. And if you do ever get into a problem, just drop me a mail. My email address and details is on the screen. I'm more than happy to always answer plant-related queries. Though, of course, if things do get a little bit more, we're going to have to take a look at the times, etc. with that. But thank you very much for joining me. I hope you picked up some useful information. If things weren't clear or if you do have any queries, like I said, drop me a mail, give me a shout, I'll have to answer. Otherwise, you can also get hold of us in some of our other branches around the country. There's all the details. If you did miss anything, if you joined late, etc., please follow us onto our YouTube channel, which is Google Micrographics. You'll find that this will be uploaded there, and then you can see the entire system as to what I've been talking about from there. Thank you very much for joining me. I hope you've got a wonderful time. If you've got any queries, please let me know. Otherwise, if you do have any queries right now, please put them in your chat, and I'm more than happy to answer them. Otherwise, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.